what we heard was an aalaap in the rag Malkauns. Aalaap is the primary improvisational strategy or aspect or element of improvisation in Hindustani music. A Khayal presentation has a composition at its heart, but it is primarily about Raga Vistaar or Raga Badhat. These are the expressions we use which are then rendered in English as improvisation. That is, a Khayal presentation seeks to elaborate or explore a raga. It seeks the flowering of a raga. That is, even though a Khayal presentation revolves around the composition, right? The composition itself is never the whole presentation. It necessarily, a Khayal presentation necessarily includes variation and other elements that are not pre-composed. And so we have the bandish, which is the pre-composed part of the presentation, and then we have the Vistaar, which is not pre-composed but is created spontaneously on the spur of the moment. And this aspect of Khayal presentation, as I said, has been called improvisation. Scholars and musicologists have pointed out that it is not entirely appropriate to call what happens in Khayal as improvisation, but we will not get into that here. We will stick to the Hindi word, which is actually a Sanskrit word, Vistaar, right? Because that is what we are doing, elaborating upon the rag, exploring its many hues and colors. So, aalaap is the most central strategy of Raga Vistaar. And aalaap has a long history actually. For instance, the 12th century Sangeeta Ratnakara of Sharngadeva offers elaborate descriptions of aalaap. First, in fact, the Sangeeta Ratnakara makes a distinction between aalaap and aalaapti. Aalaap, according to it, is a concise presentation of a raga so that all its basic features, that is, all the lakshanas of the raga are revealed. Whereas aalaapti is a more elaborate artistic performance that is described as progressing in a certain manner, following a certain template. Today's aalaap of Hindustani music is Sharngadeva's aalaapti. Most scholars find this. And this is Sharngadeva on aalaapti. Aalaapti is described by the experts as richly endowed with melodic contours and ornaments, colored with vocal ornaments and shadings, and full of charming curves. Sharngadeva says also that aalaapti unfolds in 4 stages. That is, it is not up to the whim of the performer to present an aalaapti in any way. So there is a mention of moving from the lower registers to the higher ones in the course of aalaapti. Now, Hindustani music, all genres display this feature, whether it's Drupad or Khayal or instrumental music. We start with the mandra, then go into the madhya, and then we go into the tara saptak. Interestingly, Carnatic alapana does not necessarily and always display this feature. So, aalaap is, as I said, the primary strategy of Vistaar in Hindustani music, and there are other aspects, other strategies too, other ways too that the raga is explored. These include bol aalaap or bol bant, in which the text of the composition is used. We also have taan, which is actually used only in Khayal and instrumental music, not in Drupad. And we have sargam, or singing or exploring the raga using the swaras, actually uttering the swaras. And in all this is done in a very stylized way, typical in a very specific ways, with of course considerable leeway and considerable room for artistry. Now we will take a look at all these various aspects of Raga Vistaar in this video. First, aalaap. In aalaap, the raga is explored using vowels like a or e, or even meaningless syllables like rida, nana, nom, tana, nana, etc. You would have noticed it in the aalaap that we heard. Now in Khayal, most of the aalaap is done within the setting of the composition. That is, the composition is first rendered, the aalaap is performed with tala as it is, and that is within the avartanas. So in that sense, we might say that aalaap is nibaddha. That is, it is bound in tala, right, because it happens within the avartanas. But it is not tied down in tala, just like the vilambit khayal itself. And so it has an anibaddha feeling. Whereas in Drupad and Carnatic music, aalaap is performed before the composition. So in Drupad, the complete aalaap, a very, very elaborate aalaap is performed before the composition. And aalaap here is clearly anibaddha. It's not bound. The aalaap that we heard in the beginning of this video was in the Khayal idiom, but it had links. This way of singing aalaap has links to the Drupad style. In Khayal, as I said, a lengthy aalaap without the bandish or before the bandish is rarely performed today. Though some older schools of Khayal, especially the Agra school, they do have this practice. This is drawn from the Drupad style. And you would also have noticed the use of syllables, as I mentioned, rida, nana, tanana, nom, tana, etc. And this brings a certain pulsation to the music. And this again is typical of Drupad aalaap, as we will see in the segment on Drupad later. Now this kind of aalaap, extensive aalaap before a bandish, is rarely performed these days in Khayal. It was performed, a few decades ago, but today, these days, Khayal predominantly has aalaap only within the bandish, after the bandish is rendered. And again, the aalaap is typically built up step by step from the lower range to the higher range, exploring each region, each swara through various phrases. So I will demonstrate around the bandish that we have heard before. This is in Shuddha Sarang and Vilambit Teen Tal, Naiya Muri Par. Muri Par. So the seamless quality is maintained. Even in aalaap, you flow between the matras of the tal. because I have speeded up the aalaap. Aalaap is done in a much more leisurely way and more explorations around each area. For demonstration, I have just taken up 2 or 3 areas. The second element of Raga Vistaar is using the text of the composition, and this is done in various ways. First, we have what is called bol aalaap. So this is actually aalaap. That is, in feel it sounds like aalaap, but instead of just having a or e, the actual words of the composition are used. So in this case, it will have the structure, the melodic contours, the melodic flow of aalaap. But instead of a, we have the words of the composition. Like in this case, it would be naya or muri par karo and so on. Bol aalaap. So I use the words of the text. It's up to the performer what words they want to use. Naya muri par karo, right? So, ye naya muri par. Naya muri par. This is called bol aalaap, which again has a loose setting in tala, right? Bol aalaap, aalaap, all aalaap in the Khayal idiom is incorporated into the avartanas, into the tala cycles. Then we have bol laya or bol bant. Here again the text bol means words, right? Speech. Bol in this context is the text. So bol laya or bol bant, in this what happens is there is rhythmic play. There is considerable rhythmic complexity while using the words of the composition. So bol bant uses words or text and rhythm or meter and is also within the tal cycle. And we also have bol taan. So taan is fast melodic runs, and so you use the words of the text while delivering fast runs, and that becomes bol taan. The same words used with some rhythmic effect become bol bant, and with faster melodic runs becomes bol taan. नैया मोरी पार करो, नैया मोरी पार करो तुम, नैया मोरी पार. Then we have sargam. Sargam is actually sarigama pa, sarigama padhani. These are sargam. Now, in this kind of vistar, the solfa syllables, that is sarigama, etc., are used. And that many musicians, many schools of music don't prefer this kind of this aspect of vistar. Sargam involves using the solfa syllables, right? Sa, re, ma, pa. In this case, ni, ni, da, sa, ni, re, re. So this is also part of exploration of the raga, one strategy of improvisation. Re, re, ma, ni, da, sa, ni, re, ma, ni, re, ma, ni, pa, ma, ma, re, ma, ni, sa, re, ma, pa, ni, mori, pa, re, re, ma, ma, ni, sa, re, ma, 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 re, ma, ma, re, ma, pa, da, pa, ma, ma, re, ma, pa, ni, ma, pa, re, ma, re, ma, 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 re, re, sa, ni, ni, sa, sa, re, re, ma, ma, pa, re, re, ma, pa, ni, ma, pa, ni, sa, re, sa, ni, ma, pa, sa, ni, ma, pa, re, ma, pa, re, pa, ma, pa, re, ma, ni, sa, re, ma, pa, re, mori, pa. And then we have, as I said, taans. Taans are a highlight of any khayal performance because they can be dazzling. So rather than a slow aalaap, intense aalaap, when you have a fast melodic run, it's more impactful. Taans are they can be very exciting aspect of of a khayal performance. And taans, there are various patterns, various kinds of taans, and so on. Taans are fast melodic runs, and there are various patterns that musicians practice, and they are rendered at various speeds also. This is a slower taan. So these actually are broad categories of broad ways in which Vistaar happens, and how these are actually translated into performance. How is aalaap done, or how is bol bant done, or bol laya done? This varies widely from school to school and musician to musician. And there is also some variability as regards the relative importance of these various elements. Some schools are more aalaap oriented and do not engage much with the text of the song. They do not have much use for rhythmic play also. Their entire thrust is on tuneful aalaap. But then there are schools, as I said, that completely avoid sargam. There are quite a few of them. And the two elements of Vistaar that all schools do use are aalaap and taan. I mean, I'm talking about Khayal, of course. All schools of Khayal, they do use aalaap and taan. But there are some schools that don't use bol aalaap at all. There are some schools that don't engage much with the bol laya and so on. And Drupad, as I mentioned earlier, does not include taan or sargam. It only has aalaap and bol bant or bol laya. Now let us listen to Bhuvanesh Komkali's rendition of a composition in Rag Yaman. And the Vistaar, as I said, a composition, a Khayal composition is never presented just like that. It's always accompanied with some Vistaar. And so here the composition itself is full of taans, and the Vistaar also proceeds with taan as the mainstay.
binala sura suna shoka tuma binala sura suna la sura suna shoka tuma la sura suna shoka tuma la suna shoka tuma binana bhai kaise mai maga piyara tuma mila piharuwa la sura suna la sura sun shoka tuma binala sura suna shoka tuma binala bhai kaise mai maga piyara tuma mila piharuwa piyara tuma mila piharuwa la sura ki mai maga piyara tuma mila piharuwa 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 tuma mila piharuwa piharuwa piharuwa